U.S. forces, they do war games. Okay, well, if China does this and we're going to do this and they do through it. Why don't they do stuff like that with like COVID? It's like, okay, cool. If we're going to lock down the world and we can't have money, we don't have jobs and everyone's losing their jobs, all right, we're going to print money. Like, why doesn't the government do something like that?
We went a century without a pandemic. So I don't know that solutions we put into place today would be the solutions we would choose 100 years from now in a next pandemic.
Hello, everyone. I'm Anita Cicero, Deputy Director of the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. And today I will be your Master of Ceremonies for Event 201. On behalf of our center and our partners, the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome. The goal of the Event 201 exercise is to illustrate the potential consequences of a pandemic and the kinds of societal and economic challenges it would pose. The scenario also highlights the very critical role that global business and public-private partnerships play in preparing for and responding to pandemics.
What do we know about the vaccine today that we didn't know while we were all testing it in America, taking it? What have we learned now?
What do you mean testing it on America? There were tests before it was released.
9 months is not a long time to test.
No, but it was tested.
Yeah, but 9 months. The average is 30. The average is 5 to 10 years. I mean, 9 months is not enough.
Okay, so you have to
test.
No, you have to ask. Hold on. It was tested in trials. Okay. By the way, I'm not claiming to be the expert on all this. I read all the same things you have, but I'm a scientist, so I read it as a scientist. Okay. There were trials. That's what the point of phase 1, 2, 3 trials are all about. They are tested enough to get data on how to then advise the larger population. Yes, it was tested. For you to say it wasn't tested is a gap between your awareness and understanding how things work and what actually happened.
The Pfizer COVID vaccine tested on stopping the transmission of the virus before it entered the market. If not, please say it clearly. If yes, are you willing to share the data with this committee? And I really want a straight answer, yes or no, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Regarding the question around, did we know about stopping immunisation before it's entered the market? No. We had to really move at the speed of science to really understand what is taking place in the market. And from that point of view, we had to do everything at risk.
In the best scientific evidence available at the time, if you do not get vaccinated, you will put other people in this organization at risk, and that organization does not want to take that risk. So you do not have this job anymore if you decline it.
SARS coronavirus emerged from a wildlife market and was the first pandemic of this century. So it's a big event. So we started to trace back from the wildlife market which species carried the virus that came into those markets. We found that it was bats, not civets was the original idea.
Right.
So then we started looking, where did they come from? And we went out to southern China and did surveillance of bats across southern China. And we've now found, after 6 or 7 years of doing this, over 100 new SARS-related coronaviruses, very close to SARS. Some of them get into human cells in the lab. Some of them can cause SARS disease in humanized mouse models and are untreatable with therapeutic monoclonals, and you can't vaccinate against them with the vaccine.
No, we're not going to have the army bust into your home and force a needle into your shoulder. That's not going to happen.
If President Biden gets his way, healthcare workers may soon be knocking on your door asking you to roll up your sleeve and get vaccinated. It's part of a new grassroots effort to make the COVID-19 vaccine more accessible.
We're sending out more mobile clinic units out there.
When you guys walk up to your door and somebody says they haven't got vaccinated, what do you tell them then?
We say, well, this is your lucky day because we're going to sign you up for a vaccine. And should they say, well, I don't know, and they are a little hesitant, then that's a great opportunity for us to begin to educate them about the process.
I can't force you to get an abortion. You shouldn't be able to force me to get
Because it's not about you. It's about people you interact with. And that's the social contract of public health.
We don't even know if the vaccine worked or not at the time.
Yes, that's what the trials are, dude. That's why these trials. Are you missing data out there?
I'll tell you where I was when the CNN feed came that it was 95% effective, the vaccine. so many of us wanted to be hopeful. So many of us wanted to say, okay, this is our ticket out, right? Now we're done. So I think we had perhaps too little caution and too much optimism.
You're assuming because somebody can take the vaccine, won't get COVID, which, by the way, I don't need to play the clips for you to see it, where everybody said, hey, if you get it, you're not going to get, if you take the vaccine, you're not going to get a Rachel Maddow, Joe Biden. I can give you Fauci. I can give you, and you've seen these clips before. It's not like you've never seen it before.
Yeah, what happened
were wrong.
Hold on. So, the strain evolved, okay, so that the vaccine that prevented you from catching COVID was tuned to the variant of COVID at the time the vaccine was designed, okay? Over time, there were variants that arose. The vaccine provided partial protection against the new variants, enough to keep you from dying statistically, and to basically keep you out of the hospital.
I'm very worried about, and I have been making this call since quite some time, is that mass vaccination will inevitably drive immune escape, will force the virus to escape the immune response that is actually induced by those vaccines. It's been documented in the literature for viral diseases that if you massively, and this was in animals, vaccinate animals with a vaccine that prevents against disease, but not against infection, that this is basically forcing the virus to select mutations that enhance its infectiousness.
I knew these vaccines were not going to protect against infection, and I think we overplayed the vaccines, and it made people then worry that it's not going to protect against severe disease and hospitalization. It will, but let's be very clear. 50% of the people who died from the Omicron surge were older, vaccinated.
Then they would develop a subsequent, the booster and a subsequent mixture of the vaccine. This is what happens every year with a flu shot.
If people continue to take shots every 6 months, we're in trouble. I think there is a cumulative risk here where we could get deep into it. There's blood clots that we can't dissolve with blood thinners. There's heart damage that we can't recover. We can't get it back. And so my fear is that this cumulative exposure, COVID is still out there. The vaccines haven't ended the pandemic. So the fact that vaccinated people are getting COVID and taking more vaccines, and we've seen public figures. We've seen President Biden, Walensky, Fauci, and others. Listen, they've had COVID, but they've had shots. Bill Gates, and they still keep taking more shots. When Anderson Cooper and Bill Gates got together, I'll never forget when Anderson asked Gates, he goes, hey, Bill, we got COVID. You took 3 shots. I've taken 2 or 3 shots. Should we take more shots? And Gates says, well, yeah, to be safe, we should take more shots. I would say as a cardiologist, no, stop taking more shots. You've already taken an enormous risk. Remember, people who've taken 1, 2, or 3 shots and nothing's happened doesn't mean they're risk-free. That 4th shot could be the one that precipitates a cardiovascular event.
They can't say, we know 100% the side effects 10 years from now. How are you going to know that?
If you say, I don't want to take the virus because it hasn't been tested for 5 years, and there could be some long-term side effect that worries me, okay? In that same moment, there's the risk factor of you getting COVID.
Sure.
Okay? Unvaccinated. At one point, 87% of everyone dying in the hospital of COVID was unvaccinated. Okay. So your risk choice is, I'm not going to take it because maybe somewhere down the line something will happen and we don't know what that is, or I will risk getting COVID. And if I get COVID, depending on your age and other things, there's a 3% chance of me dying in the hospital. That's your choice.
Somebody asked me the question the other day, if we didn't have the vaccine at all, would we be in a better or worse position than we are now? Honest answer is we don't know, but I think we'd be better off if we didn't even have the vaccine at all. We would have had probably less harm to the population.
Okay, big statement. And why? What is the data that supports this?
You go back to the very basics of the original randomized control trial. The vaccine showed you were more likely to have a serious side, and this is in a healthier subgroup population, which were chosen by Pfizer and Moderna. You were more likely to suffer a serious adverse event from the vaccine to be hospitalized with COVID. And that is during the original ancestral Wuhan strain. Think about that. You've got the same effect of harm from the vaccine, and even in the worst possible wave, it was still more harmful. The virus has mutated to become less harmful, and you've still got the same level of harm with the vaccine. It's a no-brainer. I mean, I think that you can make a very strong case that societies would have been much better off without this mRNA technology. AstraZeneca, I mean, that was in effect suspended in the UK. Even though it wasn't made public, they kind of slowly phased it out. But when you look at the yellow card reporting, and this is in a country of a population of 60 million, we had 1 million yellow card reports from AstraZeneca, which is just extraordinary. And it was publicized in news reports of a rare clotting effect or a rare issue. We know now it wasn't rare at all. So I think these vaccines have had a hugely negative impact on society, on health. And of course, everything that's gone with it has eroded trust as well in medicine.
I take the vaccine, it mitigates this, basically entirely removing the chance that I'm going to die, essentially, at my age group. And I will accept the risk that in 5 years I'll grow a third arm. That's the kind of decision making that I make. Now, that's just for me, but on top of that, if my workplace says, we don't want you coming in unless you are vaccinated and you might lose your job, I would say, why? Oh, because you could contaminate someone else, introducing a problem in their own health profile. That's the public contract. That's why workers wash their hands in the restaurant bathrooms by law. Yes, they're required to do so because you don't want poop germs in your dinner that they're preparing.
What was most criminal is telling people who had natural immunity to take the vaccine. Because some evidence suggests you were 3 times more likely to suffer a serious adverse event if you had COVID and then you took the vaccine, certainly within the first few months after it. It's beyond criminal, Jan. Let's just call it out for what it is.
When COVID first got started, I invited so many doctors to come in to talk about COVID. And then I invited people from both sides. I want both sides. I invited people from both sides. You know which side would never come? The side that was for vaccine would never, ever come because they thought they were above the average person, that they know and the rest of us are dumb. So because of that, they're not willing to come and sit down with scientists. I think that's arrogant.
What bearing has that got on the influence that intellectuals have over society as a whole?
Because they believe that since knowledge is concentrated in people like themselves, what needs to be done is, in a quote from President Obama, is to put more power in the hands of the experts.
So the intellectual temptation is to say, look, we already know everything.
That's right.
If only we also had
the power,
all the power,
yes,
everything would be just fine.
Yes.
And what's wrong with that view? Why isn't that a sensible view?
One, they don't know everything. They don't know 1/10 of everything. In fact, I argue that they probably don't know 1% of the consequential knowledge in a society.
People can't be knowledgeable about everything, but they can be knowledgeable about the extent of their own ignorance, even if they have PhDs.